The alarms shrieked through Fort Caliso's barracks like a wounded animal, jolting Captain Mara Cade from sleep. Before the second klaxon finished its wail, she was already moving, her body operating on muscle memory honed through a dozen deployments. Her cybernetic left hand, a souvenir from the Cerberus uprising, clenched reflexively as she grabbed her sidearm and harness. Across the room, Rex stood alert, his sleek, black and tan form tense with anticipation. The Belgian Malinois' augmented ocular implant glowed faintly in the dark, his cybernetic leg whirring softly as he fell into step beside her. "Showtime, boy," Mara muttered, her voice rough with sleep but sharp with focus. The dog's ears twitched forward in understanding, his tail giving one quick wag before settling into combat readiness. Together they burst into the corridor, where emergency lights painted everything in pulsing crimson. Lieutenant Jun Park nearly collided with them, his usually immaculate uniform jacket hanging open, Widget clutched protectively against his chest. The Boston Terrier's bulging eyes darted nervously, but when he spotted Rex, he gave an eager yip. "They came out of nowhere, Captain," Jun gasped, his normally calm demeanor fractured by genuine alarm. "No hail, no warning shots. They just started disabling our perimeter defenses." Mara didn't waste breath asking who they were. The answer became horrifyingly clear when she reached the command center and saw the tactical displays. 3 angular black ships hung in low orbit, their silhouettes like jagged teeth against the planet's curvature. As she watched, smaller vessels detached and began their descent. "ETA 3 minutes, reported Sergeant Chen from the comms station. Her fingers flew across the console, pulling up defense protocols. "Colony shield is at 38% and failing. Whatever they're hitting us with, it's bypassing our—" A tremendous impact shook the compound. Dust rained from the ceiling as half the screens flickered out. Widget yelped and buried his face in Jun's jacket. "That would be our landing pads," Dr. Eli Vasquez announced as he entered, his voice eerily calm despite the chaos. The xenobiologist carried a datapad in one hand and a half-eaten protein bar in the other. At his heels loped Boomber, Dusty Callahan's 3-legged pit bull, who seemed more interested in sniffing at Vasquez's pocket than the impending invasion. "Scans show bipedal life forms, heavily armored, and if the audio feeds are accurate," he added, swallowing the last of his snack, "they're laughing." Mara's jaw tightened. She'd heard that particular brand of laughter before, the cruel amusement of predators who thought they'd found easy prey. "Battle stations," she ordered. "Full evacuation protocol for civilians. Jun, get me eyes on those ships. Vasquez, I want every scrap of intel you can pull on these bastards before they—" The explosion cut her off. The entire compound shuddered as the north wall blew inward in a shower of debris. Through the smoke, silhouettes emerged, towering figures in obsidian armor, their faceless helmets scanning the room with deliberate, predatory grace. The lead invader took a single step forward, its armored boots crushing fragments of the shattered wall beneath them. When it spoke, the voice that emerged was layered with mechanical distortion and something else, a wet, guttural quality that made the hairs on Mara's neck stand up. "Pathetic creatures," it sneered, the translator struggling with certain syllables, its helmet tilted toward Rex, who stood growling at Mara's side, every muscle coiled to strike. "You leash your warriors like cattle. This world is weak." Mara kept her sidearm trained on the intruder's center mass. "You're trespassing on United Earth colonial territory," she said, her voice steel. "Stand down or be fired upon." The Korgath's laughter was a static-filled snarl. It raised one armored fist and made a dismissive gesture, and in that moment, Rex moved. The Malinois was a blur of fur and augmented muscle. He hit the lead Korgath at thigh level, his cybernetic jaws clamping onto the vulnerable joint where armor plates met. The alien staggered, its mocking laughter cutting off in a surprised grunt. It swung its plasma rifle wildly, but Rex twisted away, his grip unbreakable. "What is this?" the Korgath roared, its voice now edged with something new, not pain but confusion. "Get it off! Get it off!" Mara's tactical mind raced even as her finger hovered over the trigger. The Korgath weren't reacting like trained soldiers. They were flailing, panicking. One warrior actually backpedaled into his comrade, sending both crashing to the ground as Boomber decided to join the fun, his powerful bulk slamming into another invader's legs. Dr. Vasquez's voice cut through the chaos, breathless with realization. "They don't understand pack tactics. Their species must have evolved as solitary hunters." A plasma bolt sizzled past Mara's ear as the Korgath opened fire wildly. Widget, still clutched in June's arms, began barking hysterically, high-pitched yaps that somehow cut through the gunfire. One of the invaders actually turned its helmet toward the sound, rifle wavering uncertainly. Mara saw her opening. "Fall back to Sector 7, she ordered. "Rex, release!" The Malinois obeyed instantly, leaping back to her side, his muzzle smeared with alien hydraulic fluid. As they retreated down the smoke-filled corridor, the Korgath's comms chatter followed them, frantic, disorganized, and laced with that same unfamiliar emotion. One word stood out, repeated in rising alarm. "Beasts! The beasts!" Mara didn't smile. Not yet. But as she glanced at Rex, then at the motley assortment of dogs following their humans to safety, a plan began forming. She keyed her comm. "All personnel, this is Captain Cade. New priority objective, round up every military, police, and stray dog in the colony." Somewhere in the chaos, Dusty Callahan's voice crackled over the radio. "Hell yeah, time to teach these hairless freaks." A plasma bolt sizzled audibly through the transmission. "Respectfully, that Earth's good boys bite back." The canine recruits assembled in the abandoned cargo hangar looked more like refugees than soldiers. A dozen military working dogs stood at rigid attention beside their handlers, while twice that number of civilian breeds milled about in various states of confusion. A particularly enthusiastic golden retriever kept trying to initiate playtime with a stoic German shepherd, while a pack of wiry street mutts sniffed suspiciously at the makeshift obstacle course Dusty had rigged from scrap metal. At the center of it all, Rex sat motionless, his cybernetic eye scanning the recruits with quiet assessment. "This," announced Dusty, scratching the scar beneath his eye, "is the dumbest plan we've ever had. And I once watched you try to negotiate with a Cerberus warbot cap." He tossed a chunk of synth meat to Boomber, who caught it mid-air despite his missing leg. "No offense, boy." Mara ignored him, striding to the center of the hangar where June and Vasquez were calibrating Widget's new combat harness. The tiny Boston Terrier now sported a sleek black vest with antennae that twitched as he turned his bulbous eyes toward her. "Tell me you've made progress," Mara said. Vasquez didn't look up from his datapad. "Fascinating. The Korgath's fear response isn't just about physical threat. Their neural scans show complete unfamiliarity with cooperative hunting behaviors." He tapped the screen, pulling up a video of Rex's attack. "See how they keep targeting individual dogs while ignoring the pack? It's like watching someone try to swat each raindrop in a storm." A crash echoed from the far end of the hangar as a hyperactive border collie knocked over a stack of crates. The dog immediately began herding the scattered components into a neat pile, tail wagging furiously. June sighed. "We've got 2 days before the Korgath regroup. Half these dogs have no combat training. The other half think attack means licking faces." Mara knelt beside Rex, running her fingers through the fur at his neck. "They don't need to be soldiers," she said quietly. "They just need to be dogs." She stood abruptly, raising her voice. "Listen up. Today we're not training attack dogs. We're reminding predators how to hunt." The next 36 hours blurred into a haze of barking, sweat, and improvisation. Dusty proved eerily adept at teaching demolition skills. Boomber could now identify 17 different explosive compounds by smell. Jun discovered Widget could activate touchscreens with his nose and had the terrier practicing drone control sequences. Vasquez mapped out Korgath patrol patterns, while Mara and Rex drilled the dogs in coordinated maneuvers, using their natural instincts rather than fighting them. By dawn on the third day, their ragtag canine corps had transformed. The same border collie that caused chaos now directed smaller dogs through ventilation shafts with precise yips. A trio of mastiffs carried makeshift armor plating in their jaws like mobile cover, and at the center of it all, Rex moved with quiet purpose, the pack moving around him like extensions of his own body. The alert came just as the sun crested the compound walls. "Korgath advance force," Chen's voice crackled over the comms. 500 meters north. They've got new armor. Sealed joints this time." Mara exchanged glances with her team. Dusty cracked his knuckles. "Guess we'll have to get creative." He slapped Boomber's flank. "Time to earn your kibble, champ." Double asterisk. As they moved to positions, Vasquez caught Mara's arm. "You realize we're about to wage war with rescue dogs and strays?" Mara checked her sidearm, then looked down at Rex, who stared back with unwavering focus. "No," she said. "We're reminding the galaxy why humanity never walks alone." Outside, the first plasma blasts began to fall. The Korgath war drums pulsed through the colony's ruined streets like a sick heartbeat, their rhythmic thumping designed to instill terror in conquered species. It might have worked, if not for the answering chorus of barks, growls, and the occasional excited howl that echoed through Fort Kaliso's defenses. Mara crouched behind a shattered concrete barrier, Rex pressed against her leg, both watching as the first wave of black-armored warriors advanced through the smoke. "Remember the plan?" she murmured, fingers tightening in Rex's scruff. The Malinois huffed softly, his augmented eye tracking the invaders' movements with predatory precision. Across the battlefield, she could just make out Dusty's silhouette. The smuggler was crouched near a collapsed storefront, Boomber quivering with anticipation beside him. Somewhere in the maze of broken buildings, Jun and Widget would be preparing their surprise. Vasquez's voice crackled in her earpiece. "They've split their forces. Right flank is light on heavy weapons." Mara allowed herself a grim smile. The Korgath had adapted, but not enough. Their new armor might protect against teeth, but they still moved like solitary hunters, failing to guard each other's blind spots. She raised her fist and brought it down sharply. Chaos erupted. From alleyways and broken windows, a tide of fur and teeth surged forward. The mastiffs hit first, their massive bodies slamming into the Korgath line like living battering rams. Before the invaders could regroup, the smaller dogs were among them, terriers and corgis darting between armored legs, their barks amplified by June's sonic modulators into disorienting shrieks. A Korgath warrior stumbled, his plasma rifle discharging wildly into the air as a particularly determined dachshund latched onto his boot sensor array. But the real masterpiece was Widget. The Boston Terrier sat primly atop a ruined gunship, his tiny paws working the touchscreen of a commandeered Korgath control pad. With a final tap of his nose, every stolen enemy grenade in the combat zone simultaneously beeped to life. The Korgath had just enough time to look down in horror before Boomber's signal sent them flying, not toward the humans, but into the invaders' own ranks. The resulting explosion sent black-armored figures tumbling like broken toys. "That's my boy," Dusty whooped as Boomber came loping back, his mouth full of smoking wires. The pit bull dropped his prize at Dusty's feet with a proud snort, what appeared to be half a Korgath lieutenant's communications array. The battlefield became a surreal tapestry of canine warfare. A pack of former police dogs executed perfect flanking maneuvers, driving a squad of Korgath into waiting ambushes. Herding breeds corralled disoriented invaders into kill zones where human snipers picked them off. And through it all, Rex moved like a shadow, his cybernetic enhancements allowing him to anticipate enemy movements seconds before they happened. When a Korgath officer tried to rally his troops, the Malinois was already there, leaping onto the commander's back and clamping his jaws around the vulnerable spot where helmet met armor. The officer's panicked flailing only encouraged his troops to break ranks faster. Yet even as the Korgath line crumbled, Mara felt the shift before she saw it. The remaining invaders stopped retreating. Their movements became synchronized, their fire suddenly disciplined. Vasquez's voice was tight in her earpiece. They've switched tactics, some kind of hive mind override in their commanders. They're ignoring the dogs now. Mara watched in dismay as a Korgath warrior methodically kicked aside a yapping terrier, its rifle unwavering as it advanced on a group of human defenders. The tide was turning. She reached for Rex and froze as a new sound cut through the battlefield. Not barks, not gunfire. Singing. Jun stood atop a ruined APC, Widget clutched in one arm, his other hand holding aloft a jury-rigged transmitter. From its speakers poured an old Earth melody, "Who Let the Dogs Out?" but filtered through Korgath communication frequencies. The effect was immediate. Every armored helmet snapped toward the sound. Every weapon wavered. "Their neural nets can't process unexpected auditory input," Vasquez shouted. "It's overloading their—" The rest was lost as the dogs, inspired either by the music or the sudden confusion of their enemies, launched their final assault. Mara didn't give the order. She didn't need to. Rex was already moving, the entire canine force flowing with him in perfect, beautiful chaos. The Korgath line shattered like glass. As the last invaders fled or fell, Mara found herself standing amidst panting dogs and exhausted humans, the battlefield suddenly quiet, except for the occasional thump of a wagging tail. Dusty limped up beside her, Boomber proudly carrying 3 different Korgath sidearms in his mouth. "Think we overdid it?" he asked, wiping soot from his face. Before Mara could answer, Widget came trotting up, dragging something in his tiny jaws. Jun pried it loose and burst out laughing. "Is that—" "A Korgath commander's rank insignia," Vasquez confirmed, shaking his head. "I believe we've been challenged to single combat." Mara looked down at Rex, who met her gaze steadily. Then at the assembled dogs, military professionals and scrappy survivors alike, all watching her expectantly. She picked up the insignia, turning it over in her hand before tucking it into her vest. "Tell Warlord Grook he can have his trophy back," she said, scratching behind Rex's ears. "When he pries it from my cold, dead—" A sudden chorus of barks interrupted her as the dogs caught scent of something. The humans tensed, weapons rising, only to lower them as a single bedraggled Korgath scout stumbled into view. Its armor was dented, its helmet missing, and its movements jerky with terror. It took one look at the waiting canines, let out a whimper no translator could do justice, and fainted dead away. Dusty nodded solemnly. Message received. The War Council smelled like wet dog and burnt circuitry. Mara leaned over the tactical holotable in Fort Kaliso's command center, her cybernetic fingers tracing the glowing lines of the Korgath fleet's orbital positions. Around her, the team looked worse for wear. Dusty's left arm rested in a sling. Vasquez had a fresh burn across his cheek, and June kept blinking like a man who'd forgotten what sleep felt like. Only the dogs seemed unaffected. Rex stood at perfect attention while Widget snoozed in June's lap, and Boomber happily gnawed on what appeared to be a Korgath knee guard. "They're regrouping," Mara said, zooming the display to show the massive dreadnought hovering at high orbit. "Grook won't risk another ground assault after that humiliation. He'll glass the colony from space." Dusty poked at his injured arm with a grimace. "So we stole their toys, outdogged their warriors, and they're just gonna blow us up anyway? Rude." Vasquez tapped his datapad, pulling up schematics. "Not necessarily. Their orbital bombardment systems require precise targeting from surface beacons. If we could disable—" "They'll have backups," June interrupted, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. Widget stirred and licked his hand in sympathy. "And we can't hack what we can't reach." A sudden, sharp bark made them all turn. Rex stood rigid, his augmented eye focused on the tactical display. Then, with deliberate movement, the Malinois reached out and dragged his paw across the projection, leaving glowing streaks over the dreadnought's image. Mara frowned. "You can't be serious." Rex barked again, his tail giving one decisive wag. Dusty blinked. "Wait, he wants to attack the flagship? With dogs?" He looked down at Boomber, who chose that moment to roll onto his back with a happy grunt. "Our dogs?" Vasquez suddenly straightened, his scientist's mind racing. "No, he's right. The Korgath have sealed their armor against physical attacks, but their ships—" He pulled up new schematics. "Look at these ventilation systems. No filters, no guards. They never imagined boarding parties this small." Jun groaned. "You want to send Widget into space, into an enemy warship?" The tiny terrier perked up at his name, stubby tail vibrating. "He weighs 12 pounds. 8 with his harness off," Dusty corrected helpfully. Mara studied the schematics, then looked at Rex. The Malinois hadn't moved, his gaze locked on hers with that uncanny certainty she'd learned to trust. Slowly, she nodded. "We'll need every dog that can fit in a dropship, and—" She eyed Widget. "Some creative modifications." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Jun and Vasquez worked miracles with stolen Korgath tech, shrinking down thruster packs and oxygen units to canine proportions. Dusty proved terrifyingly good at teaching basic sabotage. Boomber could now activate timed charges with his nose. And through it all, Rex moved from dog to dog, his quiet presence steadying even the most nervous recruits. As the final preparations wrapped, Mara found herself alone with Rex in the hangar bay. The Malinois sat watching the activity, his cybernetic implants glinting in the low light. She knelt beside him, running her fingers through his fur. "Last chance to back out, boy." Rex turned his head and gently took her wrist in his mouth, not biting, just holding, the way he had when pulling her from wreckage on Cerberus, the way he'd done a dozen times before. Mara swallowed hard and rested her forehead against his. "Bring them home," she whispered. The assault began at dawn. While human forces staged a noisy diversion at the spaceport, 3 stolen Korgath shuttles slipped into the atmosphere's upper reaches. Inside, the canine strike force waited, military dogs in custom pressure harnesses, street mutts with explosives strapped to their backs, and at the lead, Rex standing rigid as the shuttle shuddered toward its target. Docking was inelegant. The first shuttle clipped a sensor array, sending it spinning until Widget, safely ensconced in the control room, managed to stabilize their approach. The second shuttle's door jammed, requiring Boomber to enthusiastically chew through the emergency release. But when the third shuttle's ramp lowered directly into the dreadnought's main ventilation shaft, Rex didn't hesitate. He leapt into the darkness, the pack flowing after him like a furry, determined tide. What followed would later be immortalized in Marine Corps legend as the Great Dog-pocalypse. Mastiffs dragged cabling through the ship's corridors, creating tripwires that sent armored Korgath sprawling. Former police dogs located and marked critical systems for sabotage. And through it all, Rex led the assault on the bridge, his cybernetic enhancements allowing him to bypass security fields that would have stopped human commandos. When Warlord Grook finally turned from his command throne to find a battle-scarred Malinois standing amid his fallen guards, the alien's shock was almost comical. "You," he rasped, his translator glitching. "You are just an animal." Rex cocked his head. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached out one paw and tapped the control panel beside him. Every screen on the bridge flickered to life, showing feeds from across the ship. Korgath warriors being herded into corners by growling packs, vital systems being dismantled by small, determined jaws. And at the engineering core, Widget proudly sitting atop the disabled main reactor, his tiny tongue lolling in a doggy grin. Grook's armored shoulders slumped. This is not warfare. This is madness." A new voice crackled over the comms, Mara's, transmitted from the surface. "Actually, Warlord, this is what happens when you threaten humanity's best friends." As the Korgath fleet retreated, their mighty dreadnought limping away with its ventilation shafts full of very proud dogs, Mara stood watching from Fort Kaliso's ruins. The first shuttle touched down in a cloud of dust, its ramp lowering to reveal Rex standing tall, his pack safe behind him. She didn't run to him. Didn't need to. He came to her, as he always had, pressing his head against her thigh with a quiet sigh. Dusty limped up beside them, watching the retreating ships. "Think they'll be back?" Mara scratched behind Rex's ears, feeling the familiar notches and scars. "Not after today." She reached into her pocket, pulling out the Korgath insignia Widget had stolen. "But just in case." She clipped it onto Rex's harness, right beside his Marine Corps tags. "Let's make sure the whole galaxy knows who really won this war." As if on cue, Boomber trotted up and proudly deposited a thoroughly chewed Korgath helmet at their feet. Dusty sighed. "Yeah, message received."